Why was everyone laughing before she even fired a single shot? Maybe because the rifle was pink, the color of bubblegum and childhood toys, not of death or discipline. Or maybe because the woman holding it didn't look like someone who belonged at Camp Pendleton's elite Marine Force recon range. Whatever the reason, by the time Rachel Mitchell laid her weapon on the table, the laughter was already rolling like thunder across the concrete. She stood there quietly, her gray t-shirt creased from travel, her old combat pants stained with years of dust that no washing machine could fix. At 28, she had the kind of stillness that didn't come from confidence. It came from exhaustion. Her hands shook slightly as she began to unpack her gear, not from nerves, but from something deeper, a rhythm that had haunted her for years. Master Sergeant Jake Sullivan recognized it instantly. Combat tremor, a telltale sign of nerve damage, a small tremble left behind by things that never leave you. But no one else noticed. "Yo, Madison, get this on live," someone shouted. Phones lifted. Screens lit up. The laughter grew. Lance Corporal Tyler Webb's voice cut through the morning haze like a blade dipped in mockery. "Barbie Sniper, here boys, check out the pink cannon." Dozens of Marines, men and women, turned their eyes toward the bright pink Barrett .50 caliber rifle glinting under the California sun. Someone whistled. Someone else called out that it must have come from a toy aisle. And just like that, the woman at the table was reduced to a punchline. Rachel said nothing. Not a glare, not a word, not even a sigh. She simply adjusted the bipod on her rifle and glanced downrange. 6,000 meters of fog and silence between her and the target. Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez stepped forward, all 6'4" and tattooed muscle of him. His shadow fell over Rachel like a mountain. "Hold up," he said. "You seriously bringing that cotton candy piece of garbage to my range?" His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, and the crowd responded on cue: laughter, whistles, jeers. "What's next? Unicorn stickers." Rachel kept her focus on her setup, her fingers moving with deliberate care. But there was something about her hands. The tremor wasn't random. It came in perfect rhythm. 4.7 seconds between each pause. Precise, consistent. Like a heartbeat turned into a metronome. And though no one knew it yet, that rhythm would be what silenced them all. From the trunk of her old 2008 Honda Civic, she pulled a small black case, its metal edges worn and dented. Every scratch was a story, every dent a memory. She placed it on the table beside the pink rifle and flipped the latches. The laughter didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder. Corporal Madison Brooks, the Marine Barbie with 50,000 Instagram followers, was streaming live. Her perfect makeup hadn't even cracked under the early sun. "Okay, family," she said into her phone, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're about to watch a civilian try to outshoot the Marines with a pink rifle. Yeah, this is gonna be good." In the background, someone bet $20 that Rachel would drop the gun before she even fired it. Someone else said she looked like she got lost on the way to a yoga class. Rachel ignored them all. She adjusted the scope, her reflection flickering across the lens, brown eyes focused and tired, a quiet storm behind them. She reached for her dog tags, hidden beneath her shirt, her thumb tracing the faded numbers for just a moment. Then she breathed, in, hold, out, 4 counts each. Her breathing matched the rhythm of her tremor. Sullivan watched her closely from the ammo station. Something about her movements scratched at a memory buried under sand and blood. Afghanistan, 2012. A forward operating base under siege. A woman behind a scope making impossible shots through a sandstorm that blinded satellites. Could it be? He blinked it away. No, that woman was gone. Phantom 7 was dead. Listen up, sweetheart, Rodriguez said, stepping closer, arms crossed. I'll give you 2 minutes to pack up your Toys R Us special and walk off this range before you embarrass yourself. This is where real Marines train, not where civilians come to play soldier. Rachel's voice, when it finally came, was soft but carried the weight of steel. I'll need 15 minutes to set up. 4 words. No emotion. No hesitation. Madison barked a laugh. 15 minutes. Honey, you could have 15 days and still miss the target at 100 meters. The live stream viewer count doubled. But Rachel was already focused. She pulled a notebook from her pocket, filled with pages of complex calculations. Wind patterns, ballistic coefficients, atmospheric lensing values, things that looked more like equations from NASA than sniper notes. The mockery continued, but beneath it something else began to stir. Confusion. Doubt. Staff Sergeant Derek Miller, the base's weapons expert, squinted at her rifle. That upper receiver. That wasn't factory standard. It was something else. Something far more advanced. He stepped closer to inspect it, but Rodriguez waved him off. Relax, Miller. Barbie's rifle here probably has glitter bullets. The crowd roared again. Rachel adjusted her glasses, not ordinary ones, but modified shooting glasses that glowed faintly at the edges. Sullivan's breath caught. AR overlays, integrated ballistic readouts, the kind used in next-gen systems, and in one particular classified protocol. Colonel Hawkins, he murmured under his breath, you might want to see this. But the colonel wasn't there yet. Not yet. Rodriguez smirked. Tell you what, you hit any target at 1,000 meters and I'll let you stay. Miss it and you pack up and never come back. Deal. Rachel looked up at him, eyes steady. 6,000. The words hit the crowd like a grenade. For a moment silence, then an explosion of laughter. 6,000 meters. 3.7 miles. Double the world record. You're out of your mind, someone shouted. Lady, even satellites struggle with that distance. But Rachel didn't flinch. She just nodded once and continued setting up. Derek Miller leaned toward Rodriguez. Gunny, I don't think she's a civilian. Then what is she? Miller hesitated, something classified. The wind shifted, the Pacific fog began to thin. Rachel kneeled, her body settling into a familiar posture. The tremor didn't stop, but her mind moved past it. Her breathing slowed. Each motion deliberate, measured, part of a ritual that wasn't just habit, it was memory. She reached into the case and pulled out a single round. Miller saw the serial number and froze. DARPA EXP, experimental prototype ammunition. Impossible to have. Illegal to use. And yet there it was. Sullivan's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough, he knew now. This woman wasn't some hobbyist. She was something else. Something that shouldn't exist. He opened his mouth to speak, but Rodriguez cut in, laughing. All right, everybody, gather round. You're about to witness the shortest shooting career in history. Phones went up again. Thousands were watching live. Rachel adjusted the scope one final time. Her hands trembled, then steadied, then trembled again. That rhythm. 4.7 seconds. The pause between weakness and precision. Last chance to walk away, Rodriguez said, half joking, half uneasy now. Rachel didn't answer. She was already counting breaths. In, hold, out. The fog lifted completely. Targets barely visible at 6,000 meters. Sullivan's voice was low, urgent. Gunny, that's Phantom Protocol. Rodriguez turned. What the hell are you talking about? Sullivan swallowed hard. Classified training program. Only a dozen shooters ever learned it. They called them Phantoms, but they all died in Kandahar. Rodriguez blinked. Then who the hell is she? 10 seconds. The range fell quiet. Even Madison's phone lowered slightly. Rachel's finger found the trigger. The tremor came, then paused. In that half-second of stillness, she exhaled. The rifle sang. Not the sharp crack of a .50 cal, but something deeper, a controlled thunder that seemed to bend the air itself. No recoil, no shock. The rifle absorbed it all like it had been waiting for that moment. For 8.7 seconds, the world was silent. Every Marine, every viewer online held their breath. Then a sound like thunder in the distance. The target, 6,000 meters away, erupted. Then another. And another. 5 layers of steel, each one meant to stop .50 caliber rounds at close range, now had perfect holes punched straight through their centers. The range fell dead silent. The only sound was the soft metallic clink of the spent casing hitting the ground. Rachel stood slowly. No triumph, no smile. Just calm. Just the tremor returning, rhythmic, human. Rodriguez's mouth moved, but no words came out. Miller stepped forward, voice barely a whisper. "That's not possible." Sullivan said quietly, "No, it's Phantom 7. Rachel turned, met his eyes, and for just a heartbeat he saw it, the exhaustion of a soldier who had lived too long with ghosts. Then, from somewhere beyond the range, the faint echo of helicopter rotors began to rise. Not military, not scheduled. Rachel's head tilted. Her jaw tightened. And for the first time that morning, she spoke with command in her voice. "Everyone inside now." And that was when the laughter stopped forever. The helicopters were still distant when the first one dipped low enough to catch the morning light. Black fuselage, no markings, no insignia. Just shadows in motion. Rachel's voice cut through the tension like a command she'd given 1,000 times before. Inside the range building now. No hesitation this time. Sullivan moved first, his instincts overriding any doubt. "You heard her, move." Rodriguez followed, shouting orders as Marines grabbed weapons and scattered toward cover. The easy arrogance from 10 minutes ago was gone. Now there was only the rhythm of boots and the metallic sound of bolts being checked. Rachel didn't run, she moved, smooth, controlled. Every action precise, despite the tremor still dancing through her fingers. She stripped the pink rifle, piece by piece, sliding each component into a compact case that looked far too small to hold what it did. Then she glanced at the sky. 3 birds, she could tell by the sound. Each one carrying 8 men, heavy load, fast approach. Shadow division. She'd known this would happen eventually. She just didn't expect it to happen here. Rodriguez stopped beside her, jaw tight. "Who the hell are you, lady?" Rachel locked the final latch on her rifle case and met his eyes. Someone who should have stayed hidden. The air shuddered as the first helicopter roared overhead. Dust whipped across the range, blinding and hot. Inside, Marines slammed the heavy blast door shut. The world outside faded to a low thrum, a heartbeat of approaching danger. Sullivan's voice was urgent. "Talk to me, Mitchell. Who are they?" "CIA shadow assets," she said flatly. "Off book. No call signs, no accountability. They're here to erase me and anyone who's seen me." "Why?" "Because I didn't die when they needed me to." For a moment, the silence inside the room was heavier than the sound outside. Then Colonel Patricia Hawkins arrived, flanked by 2 officers from command. She'd heard the alarm, but not the story. "What the hell is going on here?" Sullivan turned to her. "Ma'am, the woman who made that 6,000-meter shot, she's not a civilian. She's Phantom 7. Hawkins froze. She'd read the classified reports. The betrayal, the massacre in Kandahar. Phantom 7 had been wiped out officially. That's impossible, Hawkins said. They died 5 years ago. Rachel's expression didn't change. Not all of us. Outside, the helicopters circled tighter. The pitch of their engines changed. They were preparing for insertion. Sullivan's voice dropped. They're coming for her, and for anyone who saw what she did. Hawkins turned to Rodriguez. Get everyone armed and in defensive positions. We're not handing Marines over to spooks with guns. Yes, ma'am. Rodriguez's bellow shook the room. Force recon, defensive positions. Webb, Brooks, Miller, you're with me. Stack on the doors. Vasquez, lights out, emergency red only. The room dimmed into crimson shadow, bathing everyone in blood-colored light. The rhythmic hum of the emergency generator filled the air. Rachel was already moving, assembling something out of what looked like medical gear. Wires, coils, compact batteries. What is that? Miller asked. EMP pulse generator, she said, not looking up. Short range. Will fry their comms and optics for 60 seconds when they breach. You just carry one of those around, Tyler Webb blurted. Only when I expect company. Sullivan's tone was tight. We're outnumbered and half of us are unarmed. Not if we use what we've got, Rachel replied. The room's reinforced concrete. They'll come through the north door first, fast and loud. When they do, you hit them with suppressive fire. I'll take the first 3. Rodriguez bristled. You're giving orders now. No, she said quietly. I'm trying to keep you alive. The colonel met her eyes. Do it. You're in charge of the defense, Sergeant. The word sergeant hit Rachel like a bullet and a bomb all at once. 5 years since she'd heard her rank spoken with respect. She nodded once, slid the EMP into place near the doorway, and crouched low. Her tremor was worse now, the adrenaline amplifying it, but she didn't fight it. She timed it. In 4.7 seconds out. The rhythm of war. Outside, the thudding of boots. Then silence. They're stacking, Rachel whispered. Positions, Rodriguez barked. The explosion was blinding. The north door ripped inward by shaped charges. The room filled with smoke and the thunder of gunfire. Rachel triggered the EMP. A surge of light flashed across the room. Every electronic device screamed and died. The Shadow Division operators poured in, black gear glinting under the red emergency light. Rachel's pink rifle barked once. 1 operator down. She shifted, fired again. 2, 3. Every 4.7 seconds, another target fell. Sullivan moved to her flank, firing in bursts. Rodriguez charged forward, dragging Madison to cover as bullets chewed through the air. The sound was chaos, but there was order in it. Her rhythm cut through it like a drumbeat. Flashbang. Rachel saw it coming, the arc of silver spinning through the smoke. She fired once midair. The explosion went off harmlessly overhead. Miller shouted something that was lost in the noise. Shadow Division regrouped. These weren't amateurs. They adapted fast. But so did she. Reloading, Rachel called out. Covering, Sullivan shouted, pivoting into her firing lane. The fight raged for 6 minutes that felt like hours. Sparks, smoke, the smell of gunpowder and fear. Every breath was a decision between life and death. When the last operator fell, the silence was deafening. Rachel's pink rifle smoked faintly. Her hands trembled uncontrollably now, the nerve damage screaming. Clear, Rodriguez said hoarsely. Room clear. Bodies lay scattered in the red light. Some alive, some not. Miller's voice was low, awed. 14 down, the rest retreated. They'll regroup, Rachel said, leaning against the wall. They always do. Sullivan crouched beside her. That was phantom work, every shot, every call-out. She didn't answer, she just stared at her rifle. The color seemed almost mocking now, a soft pink weapon in a room painted with blood. Rodriguez approached her slowly. "Who trained you?" "My father," she said softly. "Robert Mitchell. He designed this rifle and the system that makes it possible." "The pink paint." She almost smiled. His idea of a joke said if I was going to carry something deadly, I should make it look harmless. Outside, the helicopter's rotors rose again, but this time they were retreating. Shadow Division was pulling back. Madison Brooks, still pale and shaking, sat against the wall clutching her dead phone. "They came to kill you," she said, "but they would have killed all of us." Rachel nodded. "That's how they clean up mistakes." Rodriguez swore quietly. "We're reporting this up the chain. Somebody's gonna answer for this." "Not yet," Rachel warned. "Not until I show you something." She reached into her pack and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. Its casing bore no markings except one burned-in name: Bishop. Hawkins' eyes narrowed. "Marcus Bishop, your handler." Rachel nodded once. "The one who sold us out, the one who left Phantom 7 to die." She handed the drive to the colonel. "Everything on there. Financial transfers, intercepted comms, recordings. It's enough to bring him down." The colonel stared at the device like it was radioactive. "Why didn't you turn this in before?" "Because no one would have believed me," Rachel said, "and because anyone I trusted ended up dead." Outside, sirens wailed. Base security was coming. But so was the truth. Rodriguez sank to the floor beside her, helmet off, sweat streaking his face. "You could have run. You knew they were coming and you stayed." Rachel's answer was quiet. "Because this time, I wasn't going to run from ghosts." Madison looked at her, eyes red, voice trembling. "I made fun of you. I streamed it. I humiliated you in front of the world." Rachel turned her head, met her gaze. "Then help me fix it." "How?" "Show them the truth, not the mockery, what came after." Madison swallowed hard. "You're serious?" Rachel nodded. "You've got the audience. Use it for something that matters." For the first time, Madison lowered her eyes not out of shame, but out of respect. The colonel stood in the center of the room, her voice steady. "Sergeant Mitchell, you've just helped my Marines repel a hostile CIA unit. I don't care what your file says, you're under Marine protection now." Rachel looked at her. "That won't stop them." "No," Hawkins admitted, "but it'll slow them down, and it'll give us time to expose them." Sullivan glanced at the shattered door, the bodies, the fatting smell of cordite. "You know this doesn't end here." Rachel's eyes hardened. "It never does." Outside, the sun had climbed high enough to burn through the last of the fog. Light streamed into the ruined range building, cutting across the wreckage in golden lines. Rachel stood slowly, cradling the pink rifle against her chest. The tremor in her hands continued. 4.7 seconds, pause, 4.7 seconds. A rhythm she once hated. Now it was something else entirely. A reminder. A metronome of survival. Rodriguez looked at her, something almost like awe in his eyes. "You're not what I thought you were." Rachel gave him a faint smile. "No one ever is." And outside, in the distance, beyond the echo of helicopters and the scent of gun oil, the world was already beginning to change. Because someone had finally seen what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. The smell of gunpowder clung to the air long after the fight was over. It mixed with the faint tang of blood, oil, and the ocean breeze creeping in through the shattered door. For the first time that morning, the range was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in that strange, heavy way that follows violence. The kind of silence that isn't absence of sound, but absence of denial. Rachel sat against the wall, her pink rifle resting across her knees. Smoke still drifted lazily from its muzzle. The tremor in her hands was more violent now, her muscles twitching with exhaustion and nerve pain. Sullivan crouched beside her, rolling up his sleeves. "Let me see your hands." She hesitated, then let him. His touch was clinical but careful. Burn marks, blisters, scars that looked too symmetrical to be accidental. Interrogation damage, he asked. She nodded once. 72 hours, no anesthesia. They wanted the location of a file I didn't give them. The Bishop file, Sullivan murmured. Yeah, her voice cracked slightly. The one that just got all of you nearly killed. Sullivan wrapped gauze around her palms, slow and deliberate, as though the ritual mattered as much as the medicine. It also saved us, he said. You could have left, you didn't. Rachel's gaze drifted to the floor. I've been running for 5 years. Running's easy, staying costs more. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. Not the sleek thrum of black helicopters this time, but the grinding diesel growl of armored Humvees. Base security. The cavalry, late but real. Rodriguez stood at the doorway, sweat streaking down his neck, rifle still in his hands though the fight was over. Security's here, he said, his voice hollow. They're not going to believe any of this. They don't have to, Rachel replied. The videos already went viral. Madison flinched. Wait my stream. Rachel looked up, meeting her eyes. 25,000 people saw what happened before you cut the feed. You can't take that back. The influencer's perfect facade cracked. I didn't mean. You wanted content, Rachel said gently. Now you have consequence. Madison swallowed hard. What happens to me? Nothing, Rachel said. If you're smart, you'll make the truth louder than the laughter. Madison blinked, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. Hawkins stepped forward, her uniform dusty, her composure fraying at the edges. Base command is locking this area down. I've got Marines sealing the perimeter. Nobody gets in or out until I say so. Rachel nodded. Good, because if Shadow Division's protocol still runs the way it used to, they'll send cleanup within the hour. Rodriguez frowned. Cleanup. Recovery team, silent, surgical. Their job isn't to fight, it's to erase. The colonel crossed her arms. We'll be ready. Rachel looked at her with something between respect and pity. You won't even see them coming. Miller had been quiet, sitting near a fallen operator's weapon. Now he held it up. Colonel, look at this. No serials, no manufacturer stamps, custom work. He turned it over in his hands. Thermal masking, adaptive camouflage coating, stuff that shouldn't exist outside of a DARPA lab. He glanced at Rachel. These your people? She shook her head. They were, until Bishop sold us out. That name again. It lingered in the air like a bad taste. Who exactly is Bishop? Hawkins asked. Rachel leaned her head back against the wall, eyes closing. Handler, CIA liaison, the kind who thought patriotism was a currency to spend. Sullivan frowned. He betrayed Phantom 7 for money. Money, she said softly, and politics. We stumbled on something we weren't supposed to see in Kandahar, a deal between rogue contractors and a defense official. Bishop sold us to silence the evidence. Rodriguez swore under his breath. And you lived. Barely. Her eyes opened again, brown and sharp, but tired, so tired it looked like she'd been awake for 5 years straight. My team didn't. Rob tried to get me out, my partner, my brother, in every way but blood. He built this rifle to cover our escape, died buying me 20 seconds. Her voice cracked on the last word. No one spoke. Even the hum of the generator seemed to hush itself. Madison looked away, tears streaming down cheeks once flawless for an audience that no longer mattered. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He'd seen grief before, but this was something different. This wasn't a wound. It was an echo that never stopped hurting. Outside, the security detail arrived, dozens of Marines, armored and alert. They fanned out, taking positions, rifles raised toward the horizon. But none of them aimed at Rachel anymore. When General Patricia Morrison stepped out of one of the vehicles, The air seemed to shift. 2 stars on her collar, the kind of authority that made even the colonel straighten unconsciously. Hawkins moved to salute, but Morrison waved her off. At ease. I got the call from command. Tell me I'm not about to walk into a Tom Clancy novel. Hawkins gestured toward Rachel. Ma'am, this is Staff Sergeant Rachel Mitchell, Phantom 7. Morrison froze mid-step. That's impossible. Rachel pushed herself to her feet, wincing as her bandaged hands trembled. With respect, ma'am, she said softly, reports of my death were exaggerated. The general studied her for a long time, then slowly raised her hand in a salute. It wasn't ceremonial, it was reverent. Welcome home, Sergeant. The words hit like a detonation. Rachel's control cracked. She returned the salute, tears slipping down her face freely now. For 5 years she'd been a ghost. Now, for the first time, someone had called her home. Rodriguez looked away, jaw tightening. Sullivan did the same. Even Madison, phone forgotten, wiped her eyes. Let's get her inside, Morrison said quietly. And someone make sure those bodies get tagged as evidence, not as collateral damage. The colonel led Rachel toward a briefing room inside the main range building, bare walls, one table, a flickering light. Hawkins shut the door. The noise of outside faded to a distant hum. Rachel placed the drive marked Bishop on the table. That's the truth, she said, and the reason men in black tried to erase you all this morning. Morrison sat down slowly. And you want what exactly? Justice, not for me, for them. She nodded toward the dog tags that hung from her neck, several, not one. 7 in total. My team, Phantom 7, every one of them died believing the system would protect them, and it didn't, it buried them. Morrison's expression softened. You've been carrying this alone. Rachel's jaw set, not anymore. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, the world moved on, Marines shouting orders, journalists trying to breach the perimeter, the wind tugging at the flags still flying over Camp Pendleton. But in that small room, the war hadn't ended. It had just changed shape. Sullivan leaned against the wall. General, with respect, we need to move Mitchell to a secure location. If Shadow Division failed, someone else will come. Agreed, Morrison said. But we're not hiding her. We're protecting her in plain sight. Public? Hawkins asked, surprised. Yes, you can't erase what the world already knows. The video's out. The story's viral. Let them try to make her disappear now. Rachel met the general's eyes. You're gambling with your career. Morrison smiled faintly. So are you. The door opened suddenly. Derek Miller stepped in, holding a small brass casing between his fingers. General, you need to see this. The round she fired, it's not standard. It's revolutionary. He placed it on the table carefully. DARPA EXP, Project Lightning Glass. I've read about it, a rail-assisted ballistic system that was supposed to be too unstable to miniaturize. He looked at Rachel. You did it, didn't you? You made it work. She nodded once. Rob made it work, I just carried it forward. Miller's voice trembled with awe. General, that technology changes everything: range, recoil, precision. We're talking a new generation of small arms. Morrison gave him a look that silenced him. Later, Staff Sergeant. Right now, we're dealing with politics, not physics. Rachel leaned forward, voice low. Bishop will run. He's too smart to wait for an arrest. You have maybe 48 hours before he disappears for good. Morrison nodded. Then we move fast. Rodriguez appeared at the door. General, press is already circling the base. Some idiot leaked a rumor about CIA involvement. Contain it, Morrison ordered. With all due respect, ma'am, you can't contain the internet. Rachel gave a weary smile. Let it spread. The truth's the best armor I've got. The general looked at her, studied her. You really believe that? Rachel met her gaze evenly. No, but I believe lies kill faster. That line lingered in the air, heavier than any bullet. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows across the base. Medics tended to the wounded. Marines walked in silence. Madison Brooks stood by the fence line, phone off, watching as the pink rifle was carefully lifted by evidence techs into a sealed case. She felt the sting of shame, but also the pull of responsibility. For the first time in her life, she had a story worth telling. Inside, Morrison straightened, decision made. "All right, Sergeant Mitchell, you've got your justice, but you're not going anywhere without protection." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am," Rachel said, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Because protection always came with strings, and she'd spent too many years tangled in them. When the general left, the colonel lingered behind. "You know this isn't over, right?" she said softly. "It never is." "Then what are you going to do next?" Rachel picked up her rifle case, her hands shaking uncontrollably now, though her voice was steady. "What I've always done," she said. "Aim steady, breathe, and wait for the wind to change." As she walked out into the cooling evening air, the Marines at the door instinctively straightened, parting for her to pass. No one said anything. No one laughed. They just watched her go, the woman with the pink rifle, the steady tremor, and the eyes of someone who'd seen too much and kept walking anyway. The sun dipped behind the Pacific, painting the sky in colors that matched her rifle. And somewhere far away, in a glass office overlooking D.C., Marcus Bishop's phone began to ring. The next morning, the base was a different world. The range that had once echoed with laughter was now ringed with crime scene tape and guarded by armed sentries. Reporters hovered outside the perimeter like vultures, shouting questions no one answered. And in the middle of it all, Rachel Mitchell sat alone at a metal table in a temporary command tent, her pink rifle sealed away in an evidence crate 3 feet from her, like a caged ghost. A cold cup of coffee sat untouched in front of her. She hadn't slept, not really. You don't rest after years of running, you wait. Because when you've been hunted long enough, even silence feels like pursuit. The tent flap opened, and General Morrison stepped in, flanked by Colonel Hawkins and Sullivan. They looked exhausted, the kind of tired that came from paperwork written in blood. "Morning, Sergeant," Morrison said quietly. "You holding up?" Rachel gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Define holding." The general sat across from her. "We've spent all night confirming your story, the data from that drive." She hesitated, then continued. "It's real, every bite of it, financial transfers, kill orders, black site operations. Marcus Bishop's name is all over it." Rachel nodded, unsurprised. "Then you know what kind of man he is." Morrison leaned forward. "He's not just a man, he's a ghost with clearance, 20 years of operations, layers of plausible deniability, but we've got him cornered." "Cornered men don't surrender," Rachel said softly. "They strike back." Hawkins exhaled. "You're expecting retaliation." "I'm expecting inevitability," Rachel said. "Bishop doesn't leave loose ends. I'm the biggest loose end he's ever had." For a long moment, the only sound was the rustle of the tent canvas in the ocean wind. Then Sullivan cleared his throat. "We've got field intel that Bishop's trying to move assets out of the country. Private airfield north of San Diego. No manifests, no logs." "Timing?" Rachel asked. 18 hours, maybe less." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then that's where he'll be." "Mitchell," Morrison said carefully, "you're not part of this op." Rachel's eyes lifted. "With respect, ma'am, I've been part of this op since Kandahar." The general's expression softened, but her voice didn't. "You're not cleared for field engagement. You're a witness, not a weapon." Rachel's hands twitched slightly, the tremor moving through her fingers like a pulse she couldn't stop. "With respect, ma'am," she said quietly, "sometimes the witness is the only one who knows where to aim." Hawkins and Morrison exchanged a look. Sullivan broke the silence. "She's right." Morrison turned to him. "You're out of line, Jake." "Maybe," he said, "but she's the only one who knows how Bishop thinks. You want him alive, you'll need her." Rachel stood, slowly, carefully, her movements deliberate against the fatigue shaking through her arms. "You can lock me up or let me help," she said. "Either way, I'm not going back into hiding." Morrison looked at her for a long moment, weighing the risk, the politics, the humanity. Finally she nodded. "Fine, but this isn't vengeance, Sergeant, it's closure, understood?" Rachel's eyes flickered a small, tired smile. Sometimes they're the same thing. The convoy rolled out at 1500 hours. 3 unmarked SUVs, 1 lead armored Humvee. The Pacific wind whipped through the canyon roads as the team moved north, the coastline stretching endless and cold. Sullivan rode shotgun beside Rachel. Rodriguez was behind the wheel, quiet for once. The radio crackled with encrypted chatter, but inside the vehicle there was only silence, the kind that settles when soldiers have run out of bravado and are left with only thoughts. Rodriguez finally broke it. "I still don't get it," he said. "Why Bishop do it, sell out his own people?" Rachel's voice was distant, almost reflective. "Because control feels like power, and power always needs sacrifice." "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "I had 5 years to think about it." Sullivan glanced at her. "You said he was your handler. That means you trusted him." Rachel's gaze drifted toward the ocean outside the window. "Yeah, I did. Until the day he called me kiddo over the radio while I was bleeding out in the desert. That's when I knew I'd been traded." The SUV hit a bump, jolting everyone slightly. Sullivan frowned. "You don't have to do this, we'll get him." Rachel turned her head toward him. "He's not afraid of you, but he's afraid of me." The radio hissed again. "All units be advised, perimeter in sight, airfield ahead, grid coordinates mark confirmed." The convoy slowed as they approached a fenced compound, hidden behind old hangars and rusting signs that read private property, no trespassing. Through the binoculars, they could see 2 private jets fueled and waiting. Men moved around them, not in uniforms, but with precision that screamed trained operators. "Shadow Division remnants," Sullivan muttered. "He's got his own army." "Not an army," Rachel said softly. "Insurance." Morrison's voice came through the radio from the mobile command truck behind them. "All teams hold positions. We're waiting on confirmation before breach." Rachel's hands rested on her lap. The tremor had returned, subtle but insistent. Rodriguez noticed. "You good?" "Always," she said, then after a pause added, "just not always steady." She opened her bag and pulled out her shooting glasses. Sullivan's stomach tightened. "Rachel." "I'm not firing," she said, putting them on. "I just need to see him." Through the augmented overlay, data flickered across her vision, thermal outlines, wind patterns, distance markers. Her gaze locked onto a tall figure walking toward one of the jets. Marcus Bishop. Older, heavier, but unmistakable. Even from 500 meters, she could see the same calm arrogance. The same man who'd smiled while signing her death warrant. "Target confirmed," she said quietly. "It's him." The radio crackled. "Teams stand by for go." But Rachel didn't wait. She opened the SUV door and stepped out. The wind hit her face, carrying the faint hum of jet engines. "Mitchell," Rodriguez hissed, "get back in the car." She kept walking. Every step was a ghost. Every breath a memory. She dreamed of this walk for 5 years. Down every desert, every nightmare, every quiet night staring at walls that weren't home. Now it was real. Through her glasses, she watched the heat signatures shift, Bishop's guards moving into defensive positions. They spotted her. A voice came over a loudspeaker. calm, smooth, condescending. "Rachel, I was wondering when you'd stop hiding." Her hand twitched, but she didn't lift her weapon. She just stood there, the wind tugging her hair across her face. "You killed my team," she called back. "You were part of the job," Bishop replied, "collateral in a bigger picture." His voice carried across the tarmac, steady, arrogant, utterly unapologetic. "You think you're the hero in this story," he said. "You're just the last liability in a file that should have been closed years ago." Rachel felt the tremor in her hands intensify. But not from fear. From restraint. "You trained me," she said softly. "You should know better than to talk while I'm calibrating." For a second, confusion flickered across his face, then realization. Morrison's voice exploded over the radio. "Mitchell, stand down, that's an order." But the moment had already passed. Rachel raised the pink rifle, calm, deliberate, and sighted downrange. The tremor continued its rhythm, 4.7 seconds pause. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. She wasn't shooting to kill. Not this time. The shot cracked like thunder, echoing across the airfield. The bullet hit Bishop's sidearm, snapping it from his hand. The impact spun him backward, his men scattering for cover. The second shot tore through the fuel line of his jet, fire blooming in the afternoon light. Marines surged forward. "Go, go, move in." Gunfire erupted from the hangars as Shadow Division operatives returned fire. Sullivan and Rodriguez sprinted to cover, weapons blazing. Morrison's command truck roared forward, her voice barking orders through the chaos. Rachel moved methodically, advancing between bursts, her tremor vanishing during each squeeze of the trigger. She dropped a guard at 50 meters, another at 70. Sullivan shouted, "Left flank," and she pivoted, firing before he finished. The man went down instantly. It was over in minutes. The airfield burned. And in the center of it all, Marcus Bishop lay on the tarmac, blood seeping through his sleeve, his hand clutching the ruin of his pistol. Rachel approached slowly. Her rifle hung at her side now. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, almost gentle. "Do you remember what you told me that night in Kandahar?" Bishop coughed, sneering. "I told you to stand down. You told me heroes die anonymous." She knelt beside him, the sunlight casting long shadows between them. "You were half right," she said, "but villains don't get remembered either." He tried to laugh, but it turned into a rasping cough. "You think you changed anything?" Rachel looked toward the burning jet. "No, but I ended something." Morrison and her Marines closed in, weapons raised. "Sergeant Mitchell, step back," the general ordered. Rachel did quietly, obediently, her eyes never leaving Bishop's face. The last thing he saw, before the medics took him away, wasn't the rifle. It was the woman holding it, steady despite the tremor that wouldn't stop. By nightfall, Bishop was in custody. Dozens of arrests followed. Rachel gave her statement in a quiet room with cameras and lawyers, and the steady hum of bureaucracy. But none of it mattered. Because the war inside her, the one that began with betrayal and silence, had finally reached its last shot. When she walked out into the cool night air, Rodriguez was waiting near the vehicles. He gave her a nod. "You good?" Rachel thought about it, for now. He smiled faintly. "That's more than most of us can say." She looked out toward the horizon, where the ocean met the stars, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel hunted. Just tired. Just human. The pink rifle gleamed in the moonlight beside her, cased and locked but somehow alive. And for the first time since Kandahar, Rachel Mitchell let herself believe that ghosts could rest. The news broke before sunrise. Every network, every feed, every headline. Ex-Black Ops Sergeant exposes CIA shadow program. The pink rifle sniper who ended a 6-year lie. Phantom 7, survivor tells her story. Rachel Mitchell watched it all unfold from a quiet hospital room at Pendleton. The walls were sterile white, the lights too bright, the air too clean, the kind of place built to heal the body but not the soul. Outside her window, the Pacific rolled and hissed against the cliffs, endless and indifferent. She sat there in silence, bandaged hands resting in her lap, tremor faint but constant. Her pink rifle, cleaned, catalogued, and returned, leaned against the wall beside the bed like a loyal dog waiting for its owner. When the door opened, she didn't look up. She already knew the footsteps. Sullivan stepped in with 2 coffees, both black, both lukewarm from the long walk. He set one on her tray table. You made the front page of everything from CNN to TikTok. Rachel gave a humorless smile. So I'm trending now. You're a headline and a hashtag. Never thought I'd go viral for surviving. He sat on the edge of the chair across from her. The generals fielding questions and D.C. bishops facing charges that'll stick. You did it. Rachel looked out the window again. No, we did it, and it cost more than anyone will ever see on camera. Sullivan nodded. It always does. He hesitated. They want you to testify in person, public hearing, Senate committee. She didn't respond. After a long silence, she said quietly, they want a symbol, not a soldier. They'll turn me into something I'm not. He studied her face. Then tell them who you are before they decide for you. She turned to meet his eyes, tired, lined, but steady. And what am I, Jake? He didn't flinch. You're the one who stayed when everyone else ran. 3 days later, the convoy rolled through downtown D.C. Protesters lined the barricades, waving signs, truth for Phantom 7, justice for the forgotten. She fired for all of us. Flashes popped like small explosions as cameras followed every step Rachel took toward the Capitol steps. She wore her uniform freshly pressed, medals gleaming, but her expression was unadorned. Morrison walked beside her, voice low. Remember, they're politicians. They'll try to make it about them. Rachel's tone was dry. Then I'll remind them who paid the price. Inside the hearing room, the air was thick with tension and perfume. Senators whispered, aides shuffled papers, and camera crews adjusted their lenses. Rachel took her seat before the microphone. Her pink rifle, sealed in a clear case, sat on the table beside her like silent testimony. The chairman cleared his throat. Sergeant Mitchell, we understand you were part of a covert unit known as Phantom 7. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And you allege that this unit was betrayed by its CIA handler, Marcus Bishop, resulting in the deaths of 6 operatives. Yes, sir. And that you personally eliminated an armed element of that same division at Camp Pendleton. Rachel's jaw flexed. I defended U.S. Marines from an illegal assassination team. The chairman leaned forward. Do you regret that action? She looked him straight in the eye. Regret isn't the right word. Remembering is. A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in on her face. The calm, the scar near her temple, the faint tremor in her hand. Sergeant, the chairman said softly, why the pink rifle? Rachel almost smiled. Because my father said if you're going to carry something built to kill, make sure it reminds you to protect. The color wasn't camouflage, it was conscience. The words landed heavier than gunfire. Even the cameras seemed to pause. She continued, voice low, deliberate. Phantom 7 was sent to clean up other people's mistakes. We believed in the mission until the mission stopped believing in us. Bishop didn't just betray soldiers, he betrayed trust. And when trust dies in silence, corruption grows in its place. A senator to her left adjusted his glasses. You realize the magnitude of what you're saying, that this could dismantle entire operations. Rachel cut him off gently. Then maybe they should have been dismantled. Morrison's faint smile was visible behind her hand. The questioning went on for hours. Rachel's answers never wavered, steady, precise, human. When it was over, she rose slowly, the tremor more visible now from exhaustion. As she turned to leave, one of the younger aides, barely out of college, whispered, "Ma'am, thank you." Rachel stopped just long enough to say, "Don't thank me, remember them." That night she stood alone on the Lincoln Memorial steps, away from the noise and lights. The reflection pool shimmered with the glow of the city. She'd always thought victory would feel like relief. It didn't. It felt like an echo that wouldn't stop ringing. Sullivan found her there. He stood beside her, silent for a long moment. "They'll make a movie about this," he said. "Then they'll miss the point," she replied. "Which is? That war doesn't end when you come home. It just changes its uniform." He handed her a folded letter, Morrison's handwriting on the outside. Rachel unfolded it carefully. Effective immediately, Sergeant Rachel Mitchell is reinstated to active reserve status. Her record is cleared. Her service is acknowledged with honor. At the bottom, a handwritten note, "Sometimes truth costs more than silence. You paid it, PM." Rachel stared at it for a long time, then folded it back and slipped it into her pocket. "Are you going to accept it?" Sullivan asked. She exhaled slowly. "I don't know. I'm not sure the uniform fits anymore." "It never did," he said, "but you made it mean something." She smiled faintly, looking out over the water. "I don't know if I'm a soldier or just someone who survived long enough to tell the story." Sullivan shrugged. "Same thing sometimes." A breeze lifted off the pool, carrying the faint hum of the city, sirens, traffic, life. Rachel closed her eyes and let it wash over her. For once, it didn't sound like war. Weeks passed. The hearings turned into documentaries. Documentaries turned into debates. People argued over details they'd never lived, the ethics of secrecy, the color of a rifle, the courage of one soldier versus the failures of a system. Rachel watched it all from afar, living quietly in a cabin outside San Diego, near the cliffs where the wind always carried the ocean's roar. She spent her mornings repairing old scopes, her afternoons teaching local kids how to steady their breathing before they shot. Not for killing, for focus, for control, for calm. Some called her a legend, others called her dangerous. She ignored both. One evening, Madison Brooks pulled up the dirt road in a rental car. The influencer looked different, no camera, no makeup, just a person carrying apology like weight. Rachel stepped out onto the porch. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Madison smiled nervously. "I didn't think you'd let me." They sat on the steps, watching the sunset. After a long silence, Madison said, "I made a documentary about Phantom 7, about you. I didn't want to post it until you saw it." Rachel tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I don't want views, I want truth." Rachel studied her, really studied her. The arrogance was gone, the eyes were clearer. "Then show me," she said. Madison handed her a tablet. The video began, old photos of Phantom 7, clips of testimony, footage from the range, and Rachel's face in the courtroom. The narration was quiet, sincere. Some stories aren't about heroes. They're about people who carried the weight so others didn't have to. This is one of them. When it ended, Rachel's eyes glistened. She handed it back silently. Madison's voice shook. "Did I get it right?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Close enough." The younger woman stood to leave, but Rachel stopped her. "Madison," she said softly, "you did something rare." "What's that?" "You listened." As Madison's car disappeared down the dirt road, Rachel looked back toward the sea. The sky burned pink, the same color her father had painted that rifle so long ago. She whispered to the wind, "You were right, Dad. It doesn't have to look deadly to make a point." The tremor in her hand pulsed once more. Not weakness this time, rhythm. life. And somewhere behind her, through the fading light, the faint echo of Marines training on the range drifted through the air. Laughter, shouting, the sound of a future that might finally learn from its ghosts. Rachel picked up her rifle and walked toward the sound. Not as a weapon, as a reminder. The cabin was quiet that morning, too quiet. No wind, no gulls, just the soft tick of the wall clock and the slow, deliberate creak of wood settling under the weight of time. Rachel sat at the table, disassembling the pink rifle by habit more than need. Every motion was memorized, every click of metal against metal a heartbeat. She wasn't cleaning it anymore, she was listening to it. The phone on the counter buzzed, unknown number. She let it ring out once, twice, then answered anyway. Mitchell. A familiar voice crackled through. Morrison. Morning, Sergeant, you up for a trip? Rachel leaned back, eyes narrowing. If it's another hearing, I'll pass. Not DC, Afghanistan. Silence. Then a quiet exhale. You're serious. The new task force is clearing out what's left of Bishop's old operations. They found something. Coordinates tied to Phantom 7's last mission. We need you to verify it. Rachel's voice dropped. You want me to go back to the place that killed my team? Morrison didn't answer immediately. Sometimes closure means walking back through the fire. Rachel stared at the dismantled rifle on the table. Each part gleamed faintly in the morning light, familiar, patient, unjudging. I'll pack a bag. The flight to Bagram was long, silent, and sleepless. Sullivan went with her, volunteered before anyone asked. He sat beside her in the military transport, headphones on, pretending to sleep. Rachel didn't. She watched the clouds roll beneath them like a white sea, the world she'd spent years escaping pulling her back 1 mile at a time. When they landed, the smell hit her first. Dust, diesel, burnt sand. It hadn't changed. Nothing ever really did here. The convoy wound through the desert toward a half-collapsed compound. Sullivan read from the brief. Coordinates match Phantom 7's final transmission. Locals say no one's been out here in years. Rachel stared through the cracked windshield. That's because they know what's buried under it. They stopped at what was left of a perimeter wall. The sun hung high and merciless. A group of soldiers waited, young, curious, respectful. One of them approached. Ma'am, we cleared the main structure. You'll want to see this. Inside the ruins, it smelled of sand and memory. Bullet holes still scarred the walls. On a collapsed table, someone had placed a small metal box, unearthed from beneath a foot of dirt. Rachel crouched, brushing away the dust. Her trembling fingers hesitated before she opened it. Inside were 7 tags. Her team. The metal caught the light, flashing like tiny mirrors. Sullivan stepped closer, voice low. They were here. Rachel nodded slowly, all of them. She lifted one tag, Rob's. The edge was bent, darkened from fire. Her breath shook. He bought me 20 seconds, I should have bought him more. She sat there for a long time, knees in the dust, the sound of the desert swallowing everything else. Finally she whispered, We're going home now. Sullivan didn't interrupt. He just stood nearby, hat in hand. When she finally rose, she placed the tags back into the box and sealed it. Get them to Arlington, she said, all of them together. That night the wind howled through the broken compound. Rachel sat alone outside, firelight flickering against her face. Sullivan joined her, 2 tin mugs in hand. Instant coffee, not good but hot. She accepted it, taking a slow sip. Thanks. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the desert breathe. You ever think you'd be back here? He asked. Every day, she said softly, but not like this. He studied her profile in the firelight. You're not chasing ghosts anymore, are you? Rachel looked into the flames. No, I'm talking to them. Sullivan nodded. What do they say? She smiled faintly, that I can stop running. The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of laughter, real or imagined she couldn't tell. She closed her eyes, letting it pass through her. When she opened them, she said, "You ever wonder why some of us come back broken and some don't?" "Yeah," he said, "every day." She nodded. "It's not the violence, it's the silence after." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just threw another log on the fire. 2 days later, they flew home with the remains of Phantom 7, caskets draped in flags, escorted by the woman they once called the calm before the shot. At Arlington, the ceremony was small, quiet. Rachel stood at attention, trembling hands clasped behind her back, the pink rifle slung over her shoulder like a paradox she'd finally made peace with. When the last volley of the salute echoed through the air, she whispered under her breath, "Rest easy, boys. We're even now." Afterward, Morrison approached. "You did what most can't, Sergeant. You found the end of the story." Rachel shook her head. "No, ma'am, I just stopped reading the same chapter." Morrison smiled faintly. "So what now?" Rachel glanced toward the line of graves. "I think I'll teach. Real marksmanship, real discipline, the kind that saves lives instead of ending them." "You make one hell of an instructor." "Maybe, or just someone who remembers what not to forget." Months passed again. Life crept back slowly, like dawn after a long night. Rachel bought a second-hand pickup and started teaching at a small training center for veterans near San Diego. No ranks, no politics, just people learning to breathe again. Her students came from everywhere: Marines, cops, civilians, even one teenage girl with a pink air rifle who reminded her too much of herself. Rachel showed them how to hold steady, how to find stillness between heartbeats. One afternoon after class, the girl lingered. "Miss Mitchell." Rachel turned. "Yeah." "Why do you still shoot, after everything?" Rachel thought about it, then said, "Because it's the only way I know to stop shaking." The girl nodded slowly, as if she understood more than her years allowed. When they packed up, Rachel stood alone at the range, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. The light turned the world gold, then rose pink, the same hue her rifle once wore as a joke and now carried as a promise. Sullivan's truck pulled up behind her. He stepped out, hands in his pockets. "You still don't like quiet, do you?" She smiled. "Quiet's fine, I just prefer it earned." He leaned against the hood. "Morrison says the president wants to meet you. Metal talk." Rachel groaned softly. "That's not my language." He chuckled. "Didn't think so, but you should know, you've become something people tell their daughters about." She looked at him, half amused, half sad. "They should tell them about all of Phantom 7, not just me." "They will," he said, "because you did." For a moment, neither spoke. The ocean hissed against the rocks below, constant, eternal. Finally, Sullivan said quietly, "So is this peace." Rachel looked at the horizon. "No," she said, "it's forgiveness. Peace comes later." He nodded. "You think you'll ever forgive yourself?" Rachel's gaze stayed fixed on the fatting light. "I already did, the day I stopped shooting for revenge." The wind picked up, brushing through her hair, carrying the scent of salt and sun. Somewhere behind them, the training range echoed with another shot, sharp, distant, perfectly timed. The sound made her smile. She lifted her pink rifle, aimed at nothing in particular, and whispered to herself, "Breathe, aim, let go." And for the first time in years, when she pulled the trigger, the tremor stopped. That night, Rachel sat on the porch of her cabin, writing in an old, leather-bound notebook. She didn't write about war. She wrote about people: Rodriguez's sarcasm, Sullivan's patience, Madison's redemption, Morrison's courage. She wrote about her father, about laughter, about fear. Halfway down the page she paused, staring at the ink pooling on the paper. Then she wrote one final line. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, It simply acts. She closed the book, exhaled, and looked up at the sky. It was full of stars, cold, bright, and finally still. The ocean was louder that night. It always was when the weather shifted, waves slamming against the cliffs, wind howling through the canyons like ghosts still looking for their way home. Rachel sat on the porch, coffee mug cooling in her hands, the tremor in her fingers subtle but constant. The notebook lay open beside her, a half-finished sentence waiting for courage. She stared at it, unable to finish the thought. She'd written everything she needed to, every loss, every betrayal, every small redemption. But endings were harder. Because real endings don't arrive with music or applause. They just settle. Her phone buzzed. Private number. For a moment, she thought of ignoring it, but ghosts have a way of finding you even when you stop answering. Mitchell. The voice on the other end was male, polite, professional, and unfamiliar. Sergeant, this is Captain Drew Keller, Pentagon liaison. We met briefly at your hearing. Rachel frowned. It's late, Captain. Yes, ma'am, I apologize. I wouldn't be calling unless it was urgent. The pause that followed told her more than the words that came next. It's about the Phantom 7 files. Her heart dropped, that old, tight feeling she thought she'd buried with the past. What about them? They've been accessed remotely 2 hours ago. She set the mug down slowly. By who? We're still tracking the origin. Looks like an overseas server, possibly internal. You mean someone inside the agency? That's our concern. Rachel's voice sharpened. Is Bishop still alive? Dead, Keller said. Suicide 3 months ago in custody. She didn't believe it, not really. You're calling me why exactly? Because your name was in the file that was opened. Meaning someone's looking for me. Yes, ma'am. The line crackled with static. Keller's voice softened. You did good work, Sergeant, but ghosts don't stay buried forever. Click. The call ended. Rachel sat there in the dark for a long time, the ocean roaring beneath her. Her reflection stared back in the window, the calm face of someone who didn't want to fight anymore, but knew she might have to. She whispered into the night, I told you it never ends. By morning, she'd made a decision. Not fear, not panic. Preparation. She moved through the cabin like a ritual, checking sightlines, securing locks, packing a small bag. Her pink rifle stayed by the door, not as a threat, but as something closer to an old friend. It had followed her through death and redemption. Now it would follow her into uncertainty. She drove into town, the Pacific Highway stretching out under gray skis. At the diner, the waitress smiled, the usual Rachel. Make it to go, Rachel said, voice steady. On the wall-mounted TV, the morning news played in fragments. Unconfirmed breach of classified archives. Senate denies internal leaks. Former Marine hero remains unavailable for comment. Rachel sighed quietly. The world never knew how to let things rest. When she walked back to her truck, she noticed the reflection in her side mirror. A man sitting 2 tables back, pretending to read a newspaper, his watch hand too still. She'd seen that kind of stillness before, the kind that doesn't belong to ordinary life. Rachel didn't look at him directly. She simply started the truck and drove away, watching his reflection shrink into the distance. The tremor in her hands had stopped completely now. Not from calm, from focus. That evening, the wind picked up again. Sullivan arrived at the cabin unannounced, his headlights sweeping across the gravel drive. Rachel opened the door before he knocked. You heard, she said. He nodded. Keller called me too. They're spooked. Someone's cleaning the records, Rachel said. If Bishop's dead, it's someone else finishing what he started. He set his duffel on the floor. I'm staying here tonight. Rachel smirked faintly. You planning to babysit me? Call it backup. They spent the night like soldiers between storms, quietly, methodically. Checking gear, mapping exits, no wasted words. The kind of rhythm that comes only from people who have both lived and died enough times to know the pattern. Near midnight, Sullivan spoke softly. You ever wish it had ended differently? Rachel looked up from her rifle. What do you mean? All of it, Phantom 7, Bishop, the hearing, everything. She thought for a long moment. Sometimes, but if it had, I'd still be looking for an ending that felt earned. He nodded. You ever think of leaving, disappearing for good? I did, she said, but I figured I'd rather be found than forgotten. He smiled faintly. That's the difference between surviving and living. The clock ticked softly between them. The first shot came at 2:14 a.m. A window shattered near the kitchen. Rachel and Sullivan were already moving before the glass hit the floor. Down, Sullivan shouted. She dove behind the counter, grabbing the rifle. Outside, the night was alive with wind and moonlight and movement. 3 figures, silhouettes low, efficient. They're not amateurs, Sullivan whispered. Neither are we, Rachel replied. She sighted through the scope, slow and deliberate. Her breath steadied, her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm she'd once feared. 4.7 seconds, hold, release. The first target dropped before the others even knew. The second dove for cover behind the truck. The third fired a suppressed round that grazed the wooden doorframe beside Sullivan's head. Rachel pivoted. Another breath, another shot. Silence. Only the wind remained. Sullivan exhaled shakily. You think that's it? Rachel didn't answer. She moved toward the bodies, rifle ready. One of the men was still alive, blood pooling under him. He reached for something, not a weapon, a badge. CIA. No names, just a symbol. Rachel crouched, eyes narrowing. Who sent you? The man coughed, smirking through blood. You already know. Bishop's dead. Bishop was a name, not a man. His hand fell limp. Rachel stood slowly, the wind whipping through her hair. She looked at Sullivan. This isn't over. It was never about Bishop. Then who? She stared at the badge, the ones who built him. By dawn, the cabin was quiet again. The bodies were gone, taken by military response teams before the media could smell blood. Morrison called just after sunrise. We're locking this down, Mitchell. Official story is an attempted break-in, nothing else. Rachel's voice was calm. You can bury the story, ma'am, but not the truth. I'm not burying it, Morrison said softly. I'm protecting you. Rachel smiled faintly. That's what Bishop said too. There was a pause. Then Morrison said, You still have that drive, don't you? Rachel didn't answer. She didn't have to. Keep it safe, Morrison said finally, and keep yourself safer. Click. Later that day, Rachel stood on the cliffside, the ocean roaring below her. She held the rifle in one hand, the drive in the other. The wind tugged at her jacket, the smell of salt and storm heavy in the air. Sullivan joined her, bruised but steady. You're thinking of running again, he said. No, she said, just changing my field of fire. He frowned, meaning. Someone built this machine, she said, nodding toward the horizon. Someone bigger than Bishop, someone who thinks silence is safety. And you're going after them. Rachel's eyes hardened. I'm not going after anyone. I'm just making sure they can't erase what's left of us. He studied her for a long moment. You ever get tired of carrying it all? Rachel looked out at the ocean. Every day, but it's lighter than guilt. The wind grew stronger, whipping spray against the rocks below. Sullivan touched her shoulder lightly. You don't have to keep fighting. She turned to him, a sad smile crossing her face. I'm not fighting, she said. I'm remembering. And then, almost to herself, she whispered, because forgetting is how it all starts again. The sea roared like applause or warning. It was hard to tell which. As the sun dipped behind the waves, the pink rifle gleamed in the last light, a single defiant shimmer against the darkening world. Rachel watched it fade, the tremor gone now, replaced by something steadier. Resolve. She turned from the ocean, drive in hand, walking back toward the cabin. The camera of memory followed her, the quiet rhythm of boots on gravel, the echo of a promise not yet fulfilled. She didn't know where the next path led, but she knew she'd walk it with eyes open. Because some soldiers don't retire. They just learn to carry peace like a weapon. The storm rolled in before dawn. Waves smashed against the cliffs, lightning tore through the sky, and the wind carried the kind of warning you could feel in your bones long before you heard it. Rachel Mitchell stood at the window of her cabin, staring out into the chaos. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. The hard drive lay on the table, that small, unassuming device that had cost a dozen lives, a career, and a conscience. She carried it across deserts and oceans, through betrayal and redemption, and now it sat there humming faintly like it still had something left to say. She reached for her coffee, but her hands trembled too badly to hold it steady. The tremor was back, fierce this time but familiar. It wasn't weakness, it was a reminder she was still alive. The knock on the door came soft, measured. She already knew who it was. Sullivan stepped inside, rain dripping from his jacket. "Morning," he said. "Barely," she replied, eyes never leaving the storm. He glanced at the table. "You're thinking about destroying it, aren't you?" Rachel nodded. "If I wipe it, this ends. No more files, no more ghosts, no more people dying for something that should have stayed buried." He leaned against the doorframe. "And if you do, then someone uses it again, to justify something worse." She turned to face him. "You tell me, Jake, what's the right call?" He hesitated. "I think you already know, you just need to hear it out loud." She looked back at the drive. "I've spent my life pulling triggers. Every time I did, I told myself it was for something bigger, but maybe the biggest thing I'll ever do is choose not to." The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, carrying the smell of salt and rain and inevitability. Sullivan moved closer, lowering his voice. "You've done enough, Rachel. You don't owe anyone the truth anymore." Rachel gave a faint smile. "That's the thing about truth. Once you've seen it, you owe it to everyone." She picked up the drive, the cool metal pressing into her bandaged palm, and stepped out into the storm. The cliffs looked different in the rain, wilder, alive. The ocean below raged, foam crashing against black rock like artillery bursts. Rachel walked to the edge, water soaking her boots, hair whipping across her face. Sullivan followed at a distance, watching silently as she stood there, the drive clenched in her trembling hand. She whispered something he couldn't hear, her lips barely moving. Then slowly she drew her arm back and threw. The drive spun once, twice, then vanished into the sea. Gone. For a long time neither spoke. The wind roared, but the silence between them felt louder. Sullivan finally stepped forward. "You sure about that?" Rachel exhaled. "No, but I'm done living for certainty." She turned to him, rain streaking down her face. "You ever think about why we survive when others do?" "Every day." "I used to think it was luck," she said. "Now I think it's punishment until you find a way to make it mean something." He nodded. "And you have?" Rachel looked out at the horizon. "Maybe, but meaning doesn't erase memory." Lightning flashed across the water, illuminating her face, calm now, almost peaceful. Not because the war was over, but because she finally understood she couldn't win it by fighting. By morning the storm had passed. The air smelled clean, like the world had been rinsed of its noise. Rachel brewed coffee and sat on the porch, wrapped in an old blanket, her rifle resting beside her. Madison's voice came faintly from the old radio, a broadcast, clear and steady. In a world where silence protects the powerful, one soldier chose to speak. She didn't do it for fame. She did it because the truth deserved a voice. And sometimes, that's all a country really needs, someone willing to tell it what it's become. Rachel smiled softly. Madison had learned, maybe that was enough. She poured a second cup of coffee and set it on the porch railing, an old habit from her father. "For you, Dad," she whispered, "we did all right." The tremor in her hands was still there, but softer now, like her body had finally made peace with its scars. Weeks passed. Life slipped into rhythm again. The training range grew busier, veterans, young recruits, even families. Rachel taught them all. Not about killing, about patience. About breathing through fear. About finding calm in chaos. She never mentioned Phantom 7. Never talked about the pink rifle, or the hearings, or the ghosts. The world didn't need the legend anymore. It just needed what she'd become, proof that you could walk through hell and still come out gentle. One afternoon, a teenage girl approached her after class. She had a nervous smile and a rifle that was, unmistakably, pink. "Miss Mitchell." Rachel turned. "Yeah. My dad said you were the reason he joined the Marines. He said you saved people he knew." Rachel blinked, surprised. "What's your name?" "Emily." The girl hesitated, then asked, "Can you teach me the breathing thing?" Rachel smiled, "Sure." She placed her hands gently over the girl's shoulders. "Breathe in 4.7 seconds. Hold, exhale, that's your rhythm, not mine, yours." Emily followed the instruction, her eyes closing as she steadied herself. When she opened them again, the target downrange was dead center. She grinned. "Like that." Rachel's smile was genuine, warm, exactly like that. And in that moment, she realized something she'd missed all along. Legacy wasn't about who remembered you. It was about what you left steady in the hands of others. That night, Rachel sat by the fire, notebook open again. The pages were full now, stories, reflections, half-remembered dreams. But she turned to the last blank one, uncapped her pen, and wrote slowly, carefully. "It doesn't matter who fires the last shot. It matters who learns why it was fired." She closed the notebook, leaned back, and listened to the ocean. Outside, the wind was gentle. The rifle leaned against the wall, silent, gleaming faintly in the firelight. Sullivan's voice echoed from the porch. "You writing again?" "Just finishing." "Good ending." Rachel smiled faintly, the kind that doesn't need a sequel. He stepped inside, carrying 2 glasses. "To Phantom 7, he said quietly. Rachel raised hers. "To what they taught me." "And what was that?" "That silence doesn't protect the good. It only hides the guilty." They clinked glasses and sat together in comfortable quiet. Later, after he left, Rachel walked to the edge of the cliff one last time. The sea below was calm now, moonlight shimmering across the water like silver scars. She looked out and whispered to the horizon, "For all of you who didn't make it home, I did, and I'll carry it for the both of us." A breeze moved through her hair, soft as an answer. For the first time in years, she smiled without pain. The tremor was still there. It always would be. But it no longer felt like a flaw. It was rhythm, proof of life. She lifted her rifle, not to fire, but to feel the weight of it one last time. A reminder that peace wasn't the absence of war. It was learning how to keep your soul steady when the world shakes. She lowered it slowly and whispered, to her father, her team, herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And as dawn broke over the Pacific, painting the sky in soft shades of pink, Rachel Mitchell finally let the silence mean something beautiful.